Welcome to the Women in Technology World Series. Today we're over the moon to welcome Diane Perlman, Chief Marketing Officer at Blis, to share her insight and expertise on leading with empathy, the secret to team success. Diane, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and great to be with all of you here today. I know that everybody is very focused on what a crazy year 2020 has been so far, but I wanted to start by talking about 2019. This year, 2019, started well. I was recently newly married. I was 6 months into my new job at Blis, just back from an amazing honeymoon in Mauritius, and looking forward to more travel that year. And then I got the call. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. For the second time. 9 years ago, I'd had it and thought I was out of the woods, but to get that news during the beginning of such a great year was really heartbreaking. I want you to now notice what just happened to you in those few short seconds of me sharing that personal story with you. Some of you might have felt pangs of sympathy, thinking, oh my gosh, poor thing, sorry you had to go through that. Others might have had a pang of real empathy, having perhaps had breast cancer yourself, or maybe someone you know or someone close to you had gone through a cancer journey themselves. So you could potentially truly put yourself in my shoes. Now that's my story, but in truth, there's never been a more poignant time to talk about the subject of empathy. And in fact, it seems like the word is on everyone's lips right now, from business leaders to the average everyday person to activists to the press. And with the outpouring of support for Black Lives Matter and the global outcry to rightly condemn racism, the ability to feel and show empathy has never, ever been more crucial. But how do you step into someone's shoes, someone else's shoes, and try to understand their feelings and perspectives when you maybe haven't experienced exactly what they're feeling or exactly what they're going through? Well, the good news is that empathy can be learned. And so even if we haven't had that same experience, that identical experience, most of us are already naturally empathetic. But nurturing and building this skill will be one of the most powerful secret weapons that you've ever experienced. And that's great for connecting with other people, for building trust, empowering teams, and driving change of any kind. All right, just going to flick the slide here, it will go. And this is because empathy makes us human. And let's just let that sink in for a moment. Empathy makes that human, makes us human. And researchers generally define empathy as the ability to sense other people's emotions and to see the world, the ability to imagine the world from their perspective, see what they see and feel what they feel. And it's actually derived from a German word called Einfühlung, which means feeling in. And I think that definition, that really gives a sense of kind of the deep emotion that word brings. And simply put, empathy is the ability to bring and build emotional connections with other people and understand our impact on others by understanding them. And empathy really imagines what it might be like to be me or him or her or them, whoever it is that you're working with or interacting with. And it's certainly easier to have empathy for a person if you can imagine what they might feel based on what you know about that person. Despite not having those feelings expressly communicated to you. But with empathy, you're understanding someone's feelings, but you may not necessarily share those feelings yourself. And usually that might be around pain or misfortune of some kind. For example, when someone passes away, we feel sympathy. We would send a sympathy card, for example, and we might say, I'm so sorry you're in pain. What can I do to help? And that would be a genuine feeling that you would have. And sympathy allows you to feel compassion and concern for someone else, which is really a building block of empathy. So it's super important. And the bottom line is that you need empathy if you are in any kind of relationship, be that personal, professional, maybe it's a negotiation or a conflict resolution. Empathy is absolutely crucial. My apologies. No, I can't get this slide to go forward. Jordan, is there any way you can help me turn the annotation off? Because it seems to be keeping me from moving the slide forward. So apologies for breaking the flow here, everyone.
Apologies.
With the controls.
If you just try switching off sharing the screen and then back on.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that.
Just at the top with the orange bar.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So bear with me, everyone. I'm so sorry about this. Let me just give it another go. Can anyone see my screen just now?
Yeah. So we can see. Yeah. So we're just going into.
Okay.
So we can see your screen. So just make sure you don't click on the annotate button, and then I think
I'm going to give that a go again here. Let's see if I can get this to move forward. Okay, here we go. We're back in business. Thank you for bearing with me. Sorry about that. I'm new to the WebEx. So the premise of this talk is around a Harvard Business Review study which found that empathetic companies outperform their counterparts by about 20%. And this is really significant. And not only that, there's a guy called Bill Drayton, who's known as the father of social entrepreneurship, who believes that during times of rapid change, rapid technological change in particular, mastering empathy is a key to business survival and underpins successful teamwork and also leadership. And I'd say that it's not just technological change where this is important. I think it's change of any kind. And right now, we're currently going through this time of the most unprecedented change that probably the world has ever seen. And throughout the pandemic, leaders at companies around the world have had to balance the pressing challenges of real human needs against the business challenges that they're facing. And so while on one hand it might be a tough but perhaps correct business decision, for example, to furlough staff or put through company-wide pay cuts, the human side to this is highly challenging. It's very personal. It's also fraught with emotion. And so the ability to show empathy in these kinds of situations is absolutely crucial. But as we are on the Women of Silicon Roundabout event, it's probably important to say that empathy is often seen as a soft feminine trait. But I'm here to tell you that while women may be good at showing empathy, this is not the case. It is not purely in the feminine domain. It is a human trait, as I said before. It's part of what makes us human. So it's really important to keep this in mind. And empathy is actually a commercial skill and a great skill in your leader's toolbox that can be learned and used across businesses to build teams, to influence decisions, strengthen relationships, and build trust. So it's really, really a powerful tool, but just one of the tools in your toolbox that can help you better understand what drives people's behaviors and help them to make better decisions. So I'm going to go now into just a bit of an overview and get us all kind of level set on what are the different types of empathy out there. And there are three types of empathy. One is cognitive, the other is emotional, and the last one is compassionate empathy. So just going through them quickly to give you an overview, cognitive empathy is the act of intellectually understanding how someone feels. And this is sometimes called perspective taking. So you can understand that someone is sad without necessarily feeling sad yourself. And this is a valid way to show empathy. And a lot of us do it. And we mostly tend to react, for example, with brain power, as opposed to understanding every emotion that someone might be experiencing. And so this is about thought and intellect. It can be very useful when there's a negotiation or when you're looking to motivate people, understanding diverse viewpoints. it's a really valid and important way to show and experience empathy. The pitfalls of this is that because can be disconnected from these deep emotions, it may be that someone who's exhibiting cognitive empathy could be perceived as a bit cool or colder or detached. So something to keep an eye out for, but absolutely a very important and useful way to show empathy. The second one is emotional empathy. So this is really about feeling physically along with that other person as though their emotions were contagious. And I'm sure some of you have experienced this yourself. In fact, just the other day, now that my husband and I are working across from each other at our desks most days, I was laughing at something, and he just looked at me, and he started laughing. It's like he caught the laughter from me. This idea that emotions are contagious is real, but it's not just with laughter. If somebody is, in pain, we've all heard that expression, I feel your pain, and that's true. We do have that mirror sensation. If someone that we know or someone that we love is in pain, or someone that we care about, we actually can feel that. If somebody that your partner or anyone you deeply love comes to you in tears, it's a natural response that it would pull on your heartstrings. You might be, it might be like crying at a wedding, or you stub your toe and someone stub your toe and you cringe because you know what that feels like. It's that deep-seated gut reaction, and this is great in deep interpersonal relationships, relating to loved ones, children, very dear friends, possibly also in our careers, or even in marketing when dealing with or thinking about what consumers are feeling and thinking. So it has lots of different uses, but the challenges are that it can be very overwhelming, and we'll talk a lot about this as the conversation moves on. But sometimes if you take in so much of the emotions of others, it can be overwhelming. So this is something to watch out for. And then the last type of empathy is compassionate empathy. And this is really the holy grail. This is what combines the intellectual with the emotional, and then also adds on the ability to, or the being spontaneously moved to help or to act. And this is really what we're striving for. This considers the whole person and strikes that balance between intellect, emotion, and action. And that's the kind of empathy that we're going to be focusing on today, and how you can really put that to work in the workplace. So we've just talked about empathy and how it works. So I'm just going to swing you through the agenda quickly. We'll now move on to LEAP, which is the framework that I've developed, which I'll come on to talk about in a moment. And during that part, we'll also be going through questions you could be asking, and we'll add a bit of interactivity in there, hopefully, if it works, and if you're all up for it. And then also we'll talk about some pitfalls. It's not always smooth sailing with empathy, so we'll talk about what can go wrong and what to watch out for. And then also, we'll also have an empathy quiz. So there's an online free quiz that I'll give you. I'll display a URL, and then you can type it in, and we'll give a few minutes for everyone to do that. And then some tips, and we'll wrap up. So moving into the principles. Brené Brown, who is a famous social scientist, famous for her TED Talks, and many of you might have read her book, Daring Greatly. She says, and I quote, "Empathy is communicating that incredible healing message of you are not alone." This sounds simple, right? Of course, everyone would want to do that, but especially now when more people are feeling isolated and alone due to lockdowns, it's really, really important. But how do you go about doing this? So I've been leading teams for many, many years. And while I'm not a psychologist or a social scientist, I am an empathetic person, and I've been fascinated by the topic and the value of empathy for some time. And it's part of who I am as a person and as a leader. So I wanted to create a simple framework and a memorable framework, which I've called LEAP, to help others build that skill as well, and also to challenge myself to keep improving, because as we go along, I'll fess up when there are areas where I know that I need to improve. But LEAP stands for listen actively, empower, ask the right questions, and put yourself in their shoes. So it's very simple, easy to remember, hopefully, and I'm going to guide you through that now. But it's important to keep in mind that while empathy is useful in most every situation, it's particularly poignant or particularly useful when there's a particular challenge or an issue that someone is facing. I want you all to just think about a situation like this that you've experienced. Maybe it was a member of your team or someone in more of a personal context came to you with a challenge or a problem, and you think, actually, thinking back on it, you could have listened better, you could have empowered them more, you could have asked them better questions, and maybe tried harder to feel like what it felt like for them. I know I have. And a lot of this talk and the applications of these principles are not just for when empathy comes easily, but also for when it's hard, because sometimes that moment when you need to be the most empathetic might be the exact moment when you're least inclined to be. It could be that, you might be the obstacle that the person who needs empathy is trying to overcome, or maybe that person is standing between you and your objectives or something that you're trying to achieve with the team. So it is challenging, and I think that this framework can help you achieve and leverage empathy when it's hard and when you might not be inclined to do so, as well as when it comes more naturally. Hopefully there'll be something in there for everyone. And let's just dive straight in. So listen, this is our first principle. It sounds easy, as this says on the slide, but sometimes it's not. During these precarious times that we're in, it would not be unusual for a colleague or someone on your team or a friend or partner to come to you and say, I'm just overwhelmed. My work is piling up. I'm nervous about being furloughed, or I'm nervous about being made redundant. Maybe there's added pressures of childcare, or someone's just bought a new house or put a down payment on a flat or a car. These things all kind of mount up. When you hear about your friend's troubles, what do? Do you empathize or do you react? Now, the truth is, or the fact is, that most of us react first. We'll offer sympathy. I'm so sorry to hear this. I'm sorry you're sad or in pain. Sometimes your own agenda might even get in the way of being a good listener. So I wanted to get a little bit interactive here, and Jordan's going to help me with this. So I wanted to just ask you to help fill in the blanks on what are some of the most common mistakes you think we make when we're listening. What happens to us when we're listening? And a cheeky question, which is a bit rhetorical, is how many of you are multitasking right now? So maybe in the chat window, you can just type in, what are the things that you think happen to us when we're listening? What might we do when we're listening to somebody instead of really listening, actively listening to them? Give that a minute, see if anybody will write in the chat window. We'll try this.
Yeah, I'll definitely read them out, Diane. We've had one come in so far privately just saying, I become more aware. We've got another one coming in saying, look at the person. Another one saying, thinking ahead of a response.
Yep. That's right. We're often thinking about what thing that we were going to say. Yeah, for the answer before.
They're all coming in now, so we've got.
Yeah, I can see them flashing up. Yeah.
Finding a solution to their problems, thinking of what I will say. An error that we can make is we prepare an answer before the other person is finished. Finding it hard to focus on calls that time, especially when working from home. Trying to predict the response or interrupt. I am guilty of overlaying my own story, if not out loud, definitely in my head. And the last one is thinking about how I might deal with the situation rather than what is right for them.
Yeah, these are all great answers, and they're all true. You're sharing your personal experiences. So these are the things that happen to us. We could be daydreaming. We could be thinking of our answer. We might be thinking about what we're having for dinner. We might be judging what the other person is saying. And I know I'm guilty of that from time to time. We're all guilty of those things. We approach conversations sometimes with our own lens, and that's natural. But being empathetic and listening actively means trying to put some of those things aside and really be in that moment. So so thank you for participating on that. I really, really appreciate it. It's great. It's a great start. Gives me hope for the next interactive exercise. So thank you. But proactive listening is really important. This involves approaching a conversation with a genuine desire to understand the other person's feelings and perspective without judgment or defensiveness. And that's not always easy for all the reasons that you've just contributed here. So the advice that I would give is to really tune in to what the other person is saying without interrupting them. Look at them, avoid distractions. And also, and I think this is really challenging in this kind of Zoom, WebEx, Hangouts world we're living in at the moment, where we can't be in a room with someone, is looking at body language, facial expressions, tone of voice. What are the nonverbals? Not just their nonverbals, but also yours. Do you have a stance that's encouraging conversation, or are you with the folded arms and the skeptical look that doesn't encourage them to go on and help you understand what they're going through? So these things are really important. Really tune in, uninterrupted, and look. Make that eye contact, even virtually. Also, sometimes paraphrasing or repeating back to someone what you think they're trying to say is really helpful, because it means that they know that you understand them or are trying to understand them, and maybe you follow that up with a question. So you might say, well, I think you're saying is, and then follow up with what did you do after that, or ask them, what happened next, or whatever the appropriate thing is in that situation. And this will help that person to feel heard, and also to know that you're interested in diving in and understanding more. And then the last one is really to try not to judge. As someone said in the chat, we do hear and see things through our own lens, through our own worldview. And in order to really listen actively, we need to be non-judgmental. We have to put that aside. And one way to do this is to try not to agree or disagree with what's being said, and just simply listen. So in order to do that, you really have to step back and just focus on what is being said, and not try to jump ahead in the conversation, or to keep down those impulses to judge or give them the answer. And that will really, really help. So let's move on to the next principle, which is to empower. Empowerment is absolutely key to leadership, and it's also really impactful when talking about empathy, because in times of change, or in organizations where change is a constant, like in the scale-up world where I live at the moment, is that ensuring people feel empowered to make decisions, take action, have an impact, means that people are more likely to step up and lead. So empathy leads to empowerment. And I don't know if you remember or if you saw that movie, The Green Mile, way back when, but this was possibly one of the greatest examples of empathy that could be told, because in the movie, John Coffey, who was a big guy, he actually had these supernatural powers, and he could take away another person's pain and suffering in this kind of magical way that drew illnesses out of the other person and onto him. And I think that sometimes a lot of us, in our own well-meaning way, fall victim to this phenomenon, because we take on all of the pain and suffering of other people, whether that's in our personal lives or in our professional lives. And this falling victim to this phenomenon can sometimes lead us not just to become exhausted or jaded by taking on so much of what other people are going through, but also unable to bridge that gap to empowerment, because we're so bogged down with emotion that we can't get to the action part. What could be happening next? How do we help to lead them to find a resolution for that challenge, if that's what we're trying to do? And as leaders, friends, colleagues, we can help each other find that path that leads people to their own internally driven success through understanding and empathy. So this is really important, and the act of doing this also builds trust. So it's kind of a double win, which is really great. But we also need to do the same thing with ourselves, and the best way really to empower ourselves is through kindness. And I know that may sound a bit airy-fairy, but I think that this is really important. And it's not just about acts of kindness, doing something kind for yourself, but also it's about valuing kindness as a norm, as a commitment, as a way that you behave. And if we truly believe that kindness towards everyone is important, then that can empower us to expand kind of our circle of empathy and be even more empathetic of people who we don't necessarily share experiences with, or who don't look like us, or who we don't have a close relationship with. So this is really absolutely key. Moving into the next principle, which is asking the right questions. As we all know from personal experiences, we feel more motivated when we're understood. It's as simple as that. And consider this, can you really effectively lead someone that you don't understand? And when people feel understood, which is also very empowering, they are more receptive to the concerns of others, and also team cohesion and collaboration tend to follow from that. Understanding really opens up many, many doors. And when people feel understood, they're also more likely to take risks because they believe that they'll be supported rather than punished if they fail. And that's really empowering. And I'll just tell a short anecdote from early on in my career. I worked in a small communications firm back in the US, and the CEO of that company, he had this philosophy that he never wanted any surprises. So he encouraged us, and I was probably 24 at the time, he would always encourage us to come to him if anything went wrong or if something happened, because he didn't want to be surprised. He wanted to know what was happening if something was about to hit the fan, so to speak. And every quarter we had a company meeting where we would go around and he would play a game called Get Paid for Your Mistakes. And essentially we would go around the table and we'd have to say or share the thing that happened to us that quarter, the thing that we did that didn't work out, the campaign that didn't work, the client ding dong, whatever it was that happened. And when we did that, he would give us a crisp $100 bill, which at the time was incredibly motivating and probably still wouldn't go amiss. And the thing that was great about that is that he understood he's actually a leading crisis communications troubleshooter and works with some of the world's biggest companies to help them solve their biggest crises. He always understood that big issues always start from small ones. And so empowering us to open up and not be afraid to share embarrassing things or things that went wrong would lead to better accountability and better trust and better team cohesion. And it absolutely worked. And it's something that I will always remember so many years later and have taken with me throughout my career. So it stands to reason that it's very difficult for leaders to motivate people effectively if they don't understand their motivations and their fears. And so the best way to understand is to ask questions. And asking the right questions, you can unblock what might be standing between that person and their obstacle and help them, get to a place that's a bit more hopeful, a bit more productive, etc. So before you can start asking them questions, you also need to ask yourself some questions. So things like, what is this person feeling? Have I ever felt this way? How would I want to be treated if I felt this way? And think back to that situation where I asked you to imagine or remember earlier in the talk where you maybe didn't handle a situation in a way that was as empathetic as it could have been. So maybe think about what would have happened if you'd applied some of these questions either before or while this was happening. To be truly empathetic is about perceiving how the other person is feeling. So it's important to ask questions to help them express what's really going on, to help them to open up about that and help you to sort of get inside what's going on. And if you remember back to the listen section, it's also about, listening actively when that's happening, paying close attention to that body language, theirs and your own. And then thinking about imagining yourself in their shoes. Have you ever felt this way? And no matter how different that person might be from you or their experience, you can probably find some time in your life, some reference point that could relate in some way to what they may be going through, something that you can draw on to try to feel a bit more of what they're feeling. And then lastly, thinking about how you might want to be treated. If you were in their shoes, how would you want to be treated? And it's inevitable that some of the basic kind of human virtues would come to mind, such as kindness or respect or love, compassion, even maybe being of service might spring to mind. But obviously, people have different needs and different preferences, but being empathetic will help you take compassionate action, whatever that may be. Now we're going to delve a bit more deeply into questions. Sometimes it can be hard to know what questions to ask, but it's important to try to find the words. And if you're not sure where to start the conversation, these are a few ideas. Obviously, every situation is going to be different, so these are quite high-level, generic questions, but maybe they'll give you some ideas. And again, we're going to move into a bit of an interactive part in a moment. But firstly, thinking about asking, how is this situation affecting you? If it's something that they're going through or something that's happening in the company that might be having a direct effect on that individual, encouraging them to share more. So you might say, well, you seem upset about this. Could you tell me what initially happened that led you to be feeling that way? So trying to think of a way to acknowledge the emotion that they might be feeling and asking them to tell you a bit more about what's happening with them. It might be about goal achievement. So, asking them to talk to you about how what's happened is keeping them from achieving their goal or getting stuff done. It may be inefficiencies, or it may be something happening, again, with the team, with the organization. And this can help you find out what those roadblocks are and kind of unpack that. And also, another question that you could ask is about what they think the ideal outcome could be. Sometimes you might have a team working towards a joint goal, but an individual is also kind of striving for a personal objective as well. And so understanding their perspective can help you link their personal goal to that greater goal of the team. And then last example here is, what did you learn from that last big hurdle you overcame? So this is about, if there's a problem that they're trying to solve, getting them to maybe reconnect with their own problem-solving skills could be really important, because you can get them to, or encourage them to reflect on a past situation where they solved a problem, and then rather than kind of staying in that place of wallowing in a current challenge, and help them sort of see the way to leverage those positive skills that they learned with the last challenge to solve this new one. So again, each scenario is going to require a different set of individual questions and approach, but hopefully this just gives you a few ideas to work with. So I was hoping you could all help maybe craft some empathetic questions that you could ask in different situations. So again, maybe go for the chat window if you're up for participating here. So if we just take these quickly one by one. So someone either comes to you, or you can sense that by maybe in your one-to-one with them, or in a meeting, you can tell they're feeling overwhelmed by work. They've got a big deadline to meet. They're working late every day. What do you ask them? How do you approach that, given this framework that I've been talking you through? If anyone wants to put an answer or a question into the chat to kind of address that scenario.
Just waiting for responses to come in, but we do have a question that's come in just relating to this section of your insight. So how do you talk to someone who doesn't want to open up and enter the dialogue when they have a closed and fearful body language?
Yeah, this is obviously really a challenge, because I guess you can't make someone talk who doesn't want to talk, but I think this is about trying to create a safe space for them, and sometimes it may be something that you need to build up over some time. It could be that you might try to empathize by sharing a personal story from yourself that is either related or something that can maybe help to encourage them to share, again, not in an underhanded way, but in a way just to share with them that it's okay to open up. And I'm going to come on in my next slide actually to talk about some of these things that you can do and say in those sort of those situations where you actually don't know what to say. So we'll hold that one for a moment, but hopefully that is a little bit helpful. I mean, it is very challenging if someone doesn't want to talk. I think another thing you can look at doing is even offering them someone else within the team, or another resource that they might talk to, because as I said earlier, it is possible that you yourself may be the obstacle that they're having a challenge with, and it may be difficult for them to speak about it. And I guess the third thing I'll say there as well is that I did a course back when I was in Microsoft, which was called Crucial Conversations, and maybe there's a few Microsofties on the call, but that was an excellent seminar. But one of the things that they talked about was trying to create a pool of common understanding, which is sort of talking about the things that you that are true or that you can both kind of agree on. If there is a disagreement, but it may be that there's not a disagreement, just kind of talking about the things that are true about the situation, and that might just create a common understanding and a framework to work from. So maybe that could help in that type of situation.
So thank you, Diane. We've just had a example question come in based on your initial one. So
Okay.
I sense that you are feeling overwhelmed at the moment. Am I reading this correctly? If so, can we talk about how we can work this through together?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Exactly. So you're acknowledging what they might be feeling, that you've sensed that something's not quite right. How can you help? Also maybe asking how, are they taking care of themselves? What are they doing to get a break? And just digging in a bit more into that, because it may be that there are other things happening, even just outside of that work deadline, that's adding to that pressure that they're feeling. On the second one, someone is upset and tearful, maybe after receiving feedback from you. Does anyone have any thoughts about what questions you might ask in that kind of situation? And while we're going, maybe we'll go through all of them in case. But maybe you might say, look, I can see that the feedback is really hitting you hard. What can I do to help build the strengths in the areas that we discussed, or just really acknowledging that hasn't hit them well, and trying to understand a bit more about what they're experiencing, and what you could potentially do to help. The next one, and this is a challenging one because we're not sitting at our desks anymore. We're at our virtual desks and looking at screens all day long. So, it may be harder to detect maybe when someone is sad, but you don't know why. And so you really have to look for those clues in those team meetings or in one-to-ones, and try to see, if there's something going on. And if so, it might be that you might say something like, and again, feel free to put things in the chat for any of these. I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts as well. You might just say, well, you don't seem like yourself today. Would you like to chat, or do you think a break would be helpful? Or, just try to encourage them to talk a bit about and share what might be happening, so that you can empathize and possibly help with that. And so the last scenario is that somebody might be angry or upset after receiving direction on how to manage a project. And this one, again, is acknowledging that you feel that emotion that they may be feeling. You seem upset. Would you like to chat about the direction I gave? And just try to open up the door for that conversation and that trust. But it's tempting in these situations to also respond with cliches. We've probably all been in a situation where someone says to us, well, everything happens for a reason, or look on the bright side. But these things, they sound good, but they don't really help the other person to feel better or to get to a solution for the challenge that they're facing. And so, and this kind of goes back to the question that was asked before, about trying to see how you can maybe crack a situation where you don't want to just be cliched, but you do want to try and help that person open up a bit, so you can maybe help. And so, acknowledging what they're going through, and we've kind of covered this in some of the examples we've just gone through, but, say, I'm sorry you're going through this, or this must be hard, or, gosh, this sucks. It might be something that you're going through together, if there's something that's happening at the company, or something that's happening with budgets, or who knows what it might be. Being genuinely interested in what their experience is. What has this been like for you? How do you feel about everything? And really, trying to tap into that. But I mean, this has to be a genuine interest. This can't be feigned interest. and that's really important. Also, sharing how you feel or admitting that you're at a loss. I mean, and that could even be helpful in the situation you were just describing before for the person who asked the question. You know, I can't imagine what you're going through at the moment. I mean, you genuinely, you don't, or, you know, or that talking about the emotion that you feel, you know, it makes me sad or angry or worried or whatever that emotion is, that this has happened. And maybe that kind of approach could open the door for them to kind of breathe out a sigh and say, yeah, well, it is really bad and here's why, or whatever that might be. The other thing is to be grateful for what they shared, and this is really important, especially if you're in that situation where someone has been reluctant to open up, really thanking them for sharing what they've shared, for trusting you and telling them how much that means to you. I know that I personally feel incredibly grateful when someone does open up to me and shares their experience and the things that they're going through. It means they trust me and that they think I could help, or at least that they think that, you know, it would make them feel better to just talk about it with me. And so I think it's good to acknowledge that. And also, you know, saying something like, you know, I know this is hard to talk about. Thank you for being open. So acknowledging that and acknowledging that leap they've taken, and back to that empowerment. You know, when people feel safe, when they feel understood, they're going to be more willing to take risks, and being open is one of those risks. And then also just being encouraging and supportive. You know, letting them know that you're here for them, telling them how you see them, because they might be in a bad place where they don't see the good side of who they are or what they're doing or what they've been working towards. So you might have a view on that. And I think that, you know, our natural instinct is to try and fix people's problems or help them just look on the bright side, as I said. And I think there's a fine line between fixing and encouraging and supporting. So one way to do this is to try to help them see what you see in them, or what you see in the opportunity or the situation. And that can hopefully help open some doors. And the last principle of LEAP is to put yourself in their shoes. And we've been talking about this really throughout the past time here as we've been going through the talk. But the real challenge here is not simply to think about how you might feel in someone else's shoes, but how that other person actually feels in their own shoes. So it's a slight difference there. And if there are any gamers out in the crowd, you know, you might want to think about this as the equivalent of sort of stepping into that other person's first-person shooter game, you know, and going on that journey with them. I mean, this is about stepping into their shoes, not just thinking about what it might be like in their shoes, if that makes sense. And being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes is really important to be able to open up new lines of communication, creating understanding, helping everyone achieve common goals. So one tool to do that, to try and put yourself in someone else's shoes, is to use something called an empathy map. And actually, I typically use this in marketing to develop customer personas. But I thought that as I was putting this talk together, that actually this could be quite useful in terms of understanding people that you're working with who are going through a challenge. So if you may be working through a particular tricky challenge with a team member, then building an empathy map could be really important. And this is about really thinking about what they would say, what they would do, what they're thinking, and what they're feeling in this particular situation. And these factors can work together, or they can work independently. And, you know, for example, what someone thinks or feels could be very different during a stressful event. Someone might feel anxiety, for example, but they might think about, I don't know, quitting their job or leaving their partner or doing something drastic. For example, so the thoughts might be incongruous with the feeling, or incongruous with something that they might be saying. So these things kind of can work together or independently, and it's quite a nice tool to kind of think about how you can really get under the skin of being in someone else's shoes by using a tool like this. Right, so this one is for you. And apologies, I should have given Jordan this link beforehand to put into the chat. So I don't know if Jordan, it's possible to copy this and put it into the chat so people could more easily click on it. But I was hoping that I found just a simple empathy quiz that you can take, which will give everybody just a quick diagnostic on how empathetic they are. And I thought it'd be really nice thing to for people to be able to take with them. And I've just got a few more slides after that to wrap up the talk. So maybe let me know if everyone's able to get into the link if you want to do it, or you can always do it later. Thank you, Jordan.
I've just shared the link with everyone in the chat, and I'll also share this in the follow-up feedback form after the webinar as well. If anyone hasn't had the time to get it, they'll have access to it.
Thank you. So I'll just give everyone a few minutes to fill it in. It's really just quick-fire questions. You shouldn't think too hard about them. Just answer them based on your kind of immediate reaction, and then it will give you the results straight away. Maybe once you've finished it, maybe just jot into the chat window whether you were surprised with the results. Does it ring true? Let us know whether you finished so we can just get a sense of how long it's taking. But it should only take just a few minutes. I told you we were going to get interactive, so hopefully this is a good way to do that. This is the awkward silence moment. So if everybody's happy and working on the quiz, then maybe just give us a thumbs up or just a yes in the chat so we know people are in and they've got it. Yes, great. Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. I think everyone's doing it.
Everybody's doing it. Okay, lovely. Cool, cool, cool. Thank you. Again, very different than being in a room full of people, but hopefully it still works. And then just let us know once you've got your results.
So still comments coming in that they're still doing it, but I just mind, which it's quite surprising. I feel that I am an empath, and obviously you get the scoring rate, but I really like how the results like break down different types of empathy, but also how you can be more empathetic and provide examples, which scanning through them now, you've mentioned in your so if anyone else has any sort of comments, they're surprised by it. So we've got some initial 99 out of 110, so very empathetic. Any other responses? We've got 80 out of 110. Cool. 80, 86, 81, 90, 83, 72.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing the scores, and don't worry, it's not a contest, or and there's no right or wrong. I mean, there is a scale of everything, so don't worry about where you are. This is about learning more about yourself and also learning how you can potentially be more empathetic. it seems like most people are completed. So so hopefully that was useful and something you can take away after and read a bit more about if you find it useful. But one of the things I wanted to touch on is that whether you've scored highly as an empath or not, you may be working or friends with other people who are more high on the empathy scale. It's really important to know also where empathy can go wrong. So I wanted to share just a few pitfalls of this before we wrap up, because empathy can trigger altruistic impulses. Obviously, when someone comes to you with something that's going on, we want to help, so we want to be altruistic, but it can sometimes, depending on what it is, can cloud our judgment, or it might lead to a decision that is good for that person but could harm others. So perhaps, for example, a member of your team is asking for preferential treatment due to some circumstance, extenuating circumstance that's happening to them, and this might be good for them, and you feel for them in that moment, but in taking that decision, it might not be good for the rest of the team. So it's important to just recognize if you are overly empathetic, it may lead you down a decision-making path that could be flawed. So interesting to look at that. And secondly, studies show that people can empathize more easily with people who are like them, people who are similar to themselves. So being empathetic can often lead or mislead, as it were, us to either hire or promote people who are more like ourselves. And this is definitely a pitfall that you want to avoid, because being too empathetic can, in some cases, hamper diversity. And then the last point is that it can sometimes lead to distress. And we've talked quite a lot about the kind of the danger of taking on too much of other people's emotions and stress and fear and anger, etc., be that at work or be that friends and family. And so, if we take on too much of that, we might just become exhausted. And so while empathy is a great tool, it's only just one tool that we have. And it's really important to try and keep these pitfalls in mind and avoid them if possible. And it's important to nurture that skill and that discipline to kind of stand back, judge your reactions and impulses objectively, and then act accordingly, so you're not too overly led by that empathic desire through emotion. And again, just a few tips for the high empaths out there is just to say, look after yourself mentally and emotionally. Make sure you're paying attention to your needs, because again, if you're taking on a lot from other people, and especially if maybe you're leading a big team, or we are all existing in a time of unprecedented turmoil. I can't believe I just said unprecedented. I think that's the most misused or overused word during this crisis, but there you go. I think it's really important to pay attention to what's going on with you and what you need, because sometimes your needs might take a backseat to the needs of other people that are kind of coming at you in different avenues. And you might need to set better boundaries, give yourself a safe space to recharge. Maybe that's about going for a run or doing some meditation or whatever that is for you, giving yourself that permission to unplug, to create that boundary, to say no, to not take on something that is going to weigh you down. You might even want to make sure you're spending time either in person or on a call with somebody who is one of those energy givers. And we all have friends like that that can really help you recharge. The other thing to be aware of is that empaths are also can be emotional projectors. When that person is really up, everyone in the room can be up. When that person is down, it has that effect. We talked about those emotions, that mirroring of what's happening. And so being aware that this is something that can happen, the power that you wield, is really important. And then also, as we said, and this doesn't go just for empaths, this is for everyone, to be kind to yourself and find that way to that permission to make time for yourself, to say no, to look after yourself, etc. Make sure you're taking care of you. And especially now, there's just so much pressure and so much going on that it's really important for all of us to take stock and make sure we're looking after ourselves. And I'll leave you with just a quote, which I thought was really good, from The 6 Habits of Highly Empathetic People. And this is that in the 21st century, it should become the age of empathy, when we discover ourselves not simply through self-reflection, through thinking about ourselves through our lens, but also by becoming interested in the lives of others. And I hope that this talk has given you some tools to become a little bit more interested in the lives of others around you in the workplace or in your personal life, and use these tools to become a better leader, a better friend, coach, partner, or whatever that might be, and helping people on your teams and throughout your life to overcome the obstacles. And I hope that applying these LEAP principles at any time can help you become more empathetic, and especially when empathy is hard. So thank you so much. That wraps up my talk, and only appropriate I should end with a question about how do you feel about that, and thanks for listening. So thank you so much, and I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Diane. That was just such a great webinar, and very, very timely, but also something that I think sort of cements what is needed for the new normal we are building, as they say. So one question that came in earlier, just waiting for further questions to come in, is how do we distinguish between demonstrating empathy and misappropriating someone else's experiences as our new cause of the day?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I'm also happy for anyone who's listening who has some thoughts about that to share their views in the chat as well. I mean, I think that it's really important when you're trying to demonstrate to someone. I think in when I was talking about the kind of questions the things to say when you don't know what to ask, when you're sharing something back about yourself to try and show that you feel their pain or whatever it might be, you have to make sure that you're not diminishing their experience and making it about you. And I think this is really important balance, because sometimes when you're trying to be empathetic, we might share something, a personal story from ourselves, and then that becomes the focus of the conversation, rather than really focusing on what is happening with that individual. So I don't know, hopefully that answers it a bit. If not, maybe post a follow-up question, or I'm happy to follow up after, but I think it is a fine line and something to look out for.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've just had the registrant saying it does, thank you. And just another question coming in just before we end. What do you understand by an empathetic company? I only know about empathetic persons.
Yes, and I think that, I guess my read on that would be that an empathetic company would be made up of empathetic people. So these are the people who are, setting the core values of the company, and then demonstrating those through their words and their actions and their policies, and the people that they hire, etc. So I think it is, I guess you could say that there's an empathetic company, but ultimately it is the people within that company that make it empathetic. That would be my read on that.
Thank you. The original person asked the question, so it's very helpful, and thank you very much. And on that note, just thank you so much again, Diane, for sharing your insight. For all our participants, please take note of obviously Diane's email and her Twitter at the bottom of the presentation slide. And obviously, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Diane to follow up further, or get in touch with ourselves in regards to the webinar. Thank you, Diane, and thank you to all our registrants.
Thank you very much, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.